The night is never as silent as it seems. Imagine standing alone in the shadows of a forgotten valley, where a simple stone marker marks the ground, an unremarkable memorial to a community that vanished. But beneath that quiet exterior lies a darkness so profound, it has been buried in silence for nearly 2 centuries. Tonight, you will learn about the Coleman family, a name you've never heard, yet a nightmare that has shaped a hidden chapter of American history. Their story is not one of salvation, but of terror cloaked in faith. This is a tale of power weaponized through religion, a kingdom built on fear, obedience, and death. A story so disturbing, it challenges the very foundation of what we believe about family, faith, and freedom. What you are about to hear is forbidden knowledge. Once it settles in your mind, you can never unknow it. Are you ready to peer into the abyss? The year was 1837. Southeastern Ohio's wilderness stretched vast and unforgiving, a land caught between civilization and raw wilderness. Here, Elder Daniel Coleman arrived, a man with piercing blue eyes and a voice that could bend even the hardest sinner to his will. But Daniel was no ordinary preacher. He was a master manipulator, claiming divine visions that demanded total surrender. With his wife Sarah and their 3 children, he purchased a 400-acre estate, paid in gold coins, raising suspicions but silencing questions with promises of a new Eden. Advertisements promised salvation and communal harmony for those desperate enough to believe. Families, broken by hardship and hope, came willingly into his fold, unaware they were stepping into a carefully laid trap, a paradise designed to imprison them. At first, the New Canaan Community Farm seemed to fulfill Elder Coleman's promises. Well-built cabins, shared meals, and prayers filled the days. Coleman worked alongside them, preaching of biblical unity and the joy of communal living. But the surface was a lie. Slowly, the weight of control tightened. Workdays stretched endlessly, food grew scarce, and punishments became brutal. The community was reshaped into a machine of labor and submission, where questioning was forbidden and the flesh had to be broken to strengthen the spirit. Those who resisted were dragged into public humiliation, confessing sins they didn't commit, their voices shaking as the crowd watched. The first death arrived barely 6 months after the community's founding. A man who had labored himself to death under Coleman's command. His demise worshipped as divine sacrifice. Behind closed doors, the Coleman family lived in stark contrast to their flock. While the community starved on watery soup, the Colemans dined on fine china with laughter echoing late into the night. They wore clean, pristine clothes while others toiled in rags. Nighttime brought whispers of music and unseen celebrations from the main house, sounds that haunted the worn cabins surrounding it. When questioned, Elder Coleman silenced doubters with promises of spiritual reward for those who had surrendered fully to God's will. But the truth was far darker. While the community suffered, the Coleman family enriched themselves, hoarding the labor and treasures of those who died under their watch. The facade of faith was a mask for greed and cruelty. Winter came with a deadly grip. Mary Washington, a young mother, froze to death in a cabin denied firewood by Joshua Coleman, the eldest son entrusted with supplies. The community was told she was taken by God's mercy, spared the trials ahead. But the fear among the families grew as the bodies piled up. 7 deaths by the end of the first harsh winter. Each funeral was a ceremony of control, a sermon reinforcing Elder Coleman's absolute authority and the lie that these deaths were blessings. Letters to the outside world were censored by Rebecca Coleman, the father's secretary, severing any hope of rescue or aid. The isolation was complete. No escape but endless work, constant fear, and the shadow of death looming over every waking moment. A young boy named Peter Miller uncovered the true horror beneath the community's surface. While cleaning the root cellar, he found a hidden cache of personal belongings belonging to the deceased. Jewelry, watches, family Bibles. Items that should have been returned to kin or buried. Instead, these were hoarded like trophies in a secret chamber beneath the Coleman estate. When Peter reported this, he was accused of impurity and sent for spiritual cleansing. That very night, he vanished without a trace. Officially, he had run away, but his mother found drops of blood trailing into the woods. The community learned in silence what that meant. The farm was no sanctuary. It was a prison, where dissenters disappeared, never to return. As the community's population swelled past 200, so too did the control of the Coleman family. Elder Daniel remained the unchallenged ruler, his word absolute law. Sarah Coleman ruled the women's labor with a brutal iron fist. Joshua managed supplies with ruthless efficiency, controlling every morsel and ration. Rebecca enforced her father's will, her beauty a dangerous weapon, while young Ezra was groomed for cruelty beyond his years. The main house expanded, with secret chambers below, rumored to contain screams muffled by thick stone. The routine was designed for one purpose: to break bodies and spirits completely, until every member was a shell of obedience. The daily grind was merciless. Woken at 4 a.m. by Sarah's bell, community members faced 12-hour workdays with only a meager noon meal. Children as young as 8 labored relentlessly, their small hands forced into exhausting toil. Evening brought spiritual instruction sessions, where Elder Coleman preached for hours, twisting scripture to demand total submission. Public confessions humiliated the weak, while those who dared to question were sent to dangerous, isolated tasks, work details from which some never returned. The whispered truth was known. Disappearances were punishments, enforced disappearances, a warning to those who dared resist the Coleman regime. But the darkest secret was yet to come. The children born within the farm's confines lived in fear and torment. Those deemed promising were taken from their parents at the age of 5 and raised by the Coleman family, indoctrinated to become the next generation of overseers and oppressors. The rest were forced to toil endlessly, their fragile bodies often succumbing before the age of 10. The farm was not just a community. It was a self-sustaining operation of horror, powered by the blood, sweat, and broken souls of those trapped within. No one left alive could speak freely, for fear of retribution from the Colemans' ever-watchful eyes. As the years dragged on, the stories of terror only deepened. The Colemans created a labyrinth of psychological control, exploiting faith to enslave minds. The line between salvation and damnation blurred until obedience was survival. The outside world became a demon-filled myth, the only truth found in Elder Coleman's voice. But beneath this veneer of piety, the family's wealth and power grew unchecked. Their influence spread silently beyond the valley, touching trade routes and local politics, ensuring that no one looked too closely at the horrors lurking in the Ohio wilderness. Halfway through this descent, pause and look in the mirror. This knowledge is a key, and keys unlock doors you didn't know existed. To claim your place among the awakened, type now in the comments, "I see the hidden chains." Repeat it twice with conviction. This simple phrase anchors you, pulls you from ignorance into awareness. It calls the shadows out of hiding and binds your identity to the truth beneath illusion. Only those who dare speak it aloud can begin to break the invisible prisons around them. The tale of the Coleman family is not just history. It is a blueprint for control that echoes through time. Secret societies, institutional manipulation, psychological warfare cloaked in faith and tradition. What happened in Ohio mirrors countless dark chapters across the world, where those in power use fear and faith to bend humanity to their will. The Coleman regime was a laboratory of oppression, refining techniques to crush hope, warp belief, and ensure obedience. Their methods were so effective, so merciless, that their legacy lingers in systems far beyond their isolated farm. Even now, decades after the last Coleman heir faded from memory, whispers persist. Locals speak in hushed tones of the farm's ruins, where shadows seem to move at night, where the wind carries echoes of distant cries. The property remains shrouded in taboo, avoided by most after dusk. Paranormal investigators claim to hear faint laughter, the clinking of glasses, the murmur of voices from the Coleman house basement. These aren't just ghost stories. They are reminders that evil, once rooted, never truly dies. It morphs, waiting for fertile ground to grow again. The psychological architecture built by the Colemans continues to inspire fear-based systems worldwide. Cult leaders, authoritarian regimes, manipulative institutions, all learning from the dark playbook written in that Ohio valley. The weaponization of faith to control minds and bodies, the use of isolation to prevent escape, the calculated use of suffering to forge obedience. These are not relics. They are strategies alive and well today, hidden beneath layers of civility and tradition. Recognizing this is your first act of rebellion. Understand this: the power structures that thrive on secrecy and fear depend on your silence. They count on your ignorance to keep their darkness alive. By uncovering the Coleman story, by acknowledging the mechanisms of control, you disrupt their grip. But beware, this knowledge carries weight. It can isolate you, unsettle your worldview, and force uncomfortable truths into the light. To wield it wisely is to become a guardian of hidden knowledge, a sentinel who stands between darkness and those who would fall prey to it. So now you stand at a crossroads, between continuing down this path of revelation or retreating to comfortable ignorance. But understand this: the darkness you've glimpsed in the Coleman family story is not just history. It is a living force, embedded in systems, institutions, and power structures all around you. The same tactics of psychological domination, manipulation through fear and faith, and ruthless control of resources are still used today to shape society, suppress dissent, and enslave minds. The deeper you go, the clearer it becomes that these are not random horrors but deliberate designs. Ancient corruption refined over generations, perfected to keep the masses compliant while a few sit atop the throne. The Coleman family wielded fear like a weapon: fear of God, fear of the outside world, fear of the unknown. Their reign was secured by isolating the community from any outside contact, censoring letters, and flooding minds with twisted theology that made escape seem both impossible and sinful. This wasn't merely spiritual control. It was a calculated psychological siege designed to break down resistance until the soul itself begged for release through obedience. What they created was a microcosm of totalitarian power, only wrapped in the disguise of divine will. Understanding this is key to recognizing the same tactics when they appear disguised in modern institutions. The hierarchical structure of the Coleman community also reveals an unsettling truth about power's nature. It is hereditary, institutional, and cultivated through trauma. The children taken from their parents and groomed to replicate cruelty were not accidents of history but intentional mechanisms to ensure the regime's survival. This legacy of indoctrination is the blueprint for how toxic systems regenerate themselves, using trauma to breed loyalty, conditioning youth to perpetuate oppression in the next generation. Recognizing this cycle is the first step toward breaking it, both in history and in your own life. Consider the role of Sarah Coleman, the matriarch enforcing brutal labor and punishment. Her iron grip over the women's work and childcare reveals the often overlooked female complicity in systems of power. She was not just an enforcer but an architect of suffering, her authority wielded without mercy. This shatters the myth that power is always male, exposing the complexity and reach of institutional cruelty. Understanding the multifaceted nature of these systems helps you see beyond surface narratives to the structures beneath. The psychological tactics used during nightly spiritual instruction sessions were not just about religion. They were about breaking individual will to meld the community into a single, obedient organism. Public confessions, forced humiliation, and the threat of disappearance created a climate of paranoia and self-censorship. This is the essence of psychological control systems, to make individuals complicit in their own captivity, turning them into enforcers of the very chains that bind them. This insight offers a mirror to modern psychological manipulation, whether in cults, corporations, or governments, that demands your vigilance. As you dive deeper, the pattern becomes clear. Fear and faith, when combined, form an almost unstoppable force of control. The Coleman family understood this instinctively. They weaponized belief, twisting hope for salvation into chains of bondage. This dark fusion is echoed in countless forbidden histories and suppressed truths worldwide, where the promise of divine favor masks the reality of exploitation. Recognizing this duality is essential to mastering your own mind and breaking free from invisible domination. Look at the community's isolation, both physical and psychological. Surrounded by wilderness, cut off from communication, the people of New Canaan were trapped not only by geography but by their own conditioned fears. This physical isolation is a metaphor for the mental prisons constructed by institutional power, walls you cannot see but that restrict your movement, your thoughts, your freedom. Awareness of these invisible boundaries is the first key to transcending them. The Coleman's growing wealth and power were fed by the suffering of others, a dynamic still prevalent in many systems today. The labor and lives of the community members became currency for the family's expansion and influence. This cycle of exploitation, harvesting human suffering for profit and power, is a dark current running beneath many historical and modern institutions. Seeing this pattern allows you to recognize when you're being used as a resource rather than a human being. What you have learned is dangerous knowledge. It challenges the sanitized narratives fed by society and demands a radical re-examination of authority and faith. But with danger comes power. To hold this knowledge is to wield it, to use it as a shield against manipulation and a sword against oppression. Your mind becomes a fortress, no longer vulnerable to the subtle strategies designed to enslave it. The question now is, what will you do with this power? The shadows that linger over the Coleman farm are not confined to history books. They have spread, mutated, and found new homes in places where you least expect. Secret societies that control governments, corporate empires that manipulate economies, ideological movements that twist truth. These are the modern descendants of that macabre legacy. By exposing the mechanisms of control embedded in the Coleman story, you gain tools to see through the smoke and mirrors of power today. Remember the children taken from their parents, raised to perpetuate cruelty. This is the hidden hand behind cycles of violence and oppression worldwide. Trauma begets trauma. Victims become perpetrators. Understanding this cycle helps you recognize when you are being conditioned to carry burdens that are not yours, to reenact patterns set by forces beyond your control. Awareness is the first step to breaking free and rewriting your own story. You are not just a spectator in this dark history. You are a participant in the unfolding battle for awareness and freedom. Every secret uncovered, every lie exposed, weakens the power of those who thrive on your ignorance. This journey is not easy. It will test your beliefs, your courage, and your resolve. But those who persevere join an invisible brotherhood, guardians of forbidden knowledge who walk the line between light and shadow. The Coleman story is a mirror reflecting the darkest parts of human nature. The hunger for power, the ease of manipulation, the fragility of faith when twisted. But it is also a call to mastery. To master yourself, you must first confront these shadows within and without. The family's reign of terror was possible because they understood control better than those they dominated. Now that knowledge is in your hands. Use it wisely. Look around you. The structures that shaped New Canaan exist today in subtler forms, in offices, political arenas, social networks. Psychological manipulation cloaked in benevolence, invisible chains disguised as traditions, and the slow drip of fear shaping behavior. Your awareness of this legacy is your greatest weapon against becoming another cog in the machine. Keep your eyes open, your mind sharp. The ritualized public confessions, the enforced obedience, the silencing of dissent, these are not relics of a bygone era. They are tools still wielded by those who seek to control. By understanding their origins in dark histories like the Coleman farm, you gain clarity and strength. You no longer respond to fear with submission but with recognition and resistance. The silence that once surrounded the Coleman family has been shattered. Their story, once whispered in fear, is now spoken aloud as a warning and a lesson. You hold that story now, and with it a responsibility. To remember, to reveal, and to resist. To stand firm against the forces that would keep you chained in ignorance and fear. The power is in your hands. Before you close this chapter, remember the phrase that marked your awakening. I see the hidden chains. Let it echo in your mind as a mantra of liberation and vigilance. Speak it aloud once more, twice more if you dare. Let it seal your identity as one who has chosen truth over comfort, awareness over ignorance. This is your crucible, and from it you emerge transformed. The story of the Coleman family is a dark mirror held up to our world. A reminder that beneath the surface of faith, family, and civilization can lie a nightmare of manipulation and control. But in that nightmare lies a path to mastery. The mastery of knowledge, self, and freedom. Walk it carefully, brother. You now carry the burden and the power of forbidden truth. Use it well, for once seen, the shadows never fully recede. If this story shook something deep inside you, if you feel the weight of these hidden truths pressing on your mind, don't let this awakening end here. Join the brotherhood of seekers who refuse to be controlled by fear or ignorance. Subscribe now, hit the notification bell, and step into a community where forbidden knowledge is not just shared, it's lived. But don't stop there. I want to hear from you. In the comments, share your own experiences with hidden truths or moments when you broke free from invisible chains. Speak openly. This is a space for warriors of awareness. And to truly lock this transformation in, type again with conviction, I see the hidden chains. Say it twice, aloud or in your mind, and feel the power of that truth rooting itself in your identity. Remember, knowledge is the first step. Action is what changes destiny. Stay vigilant, stay curious, and above all, stay free.